In the movie The Menu, Tyler and Margot travel to a private island for a fancy dinner at an exclusive restaurant. When they arrive, they notice that other important guests are also there. However, things start to feel strange when the dinner becomes more than just food. Keep watching to know how the chef's unique menu begins to reveal disturbing secrets. At the local harbor, Tyler and his date Margot waited for the boat that would take them to a private island for dinner at Hawthorne, a very exclusive restaurant run by the best chef in the country. Tyler loved food and was excited about this chef and fine dining. When the boat arrived, they were surprised to see many important people traveling with them. There was Lillian, the food critic who found the chef, and her editor Ted, actor George with his assistant and girlfriend Felicity, and 3 important tech investors named Dave, Soren, and Bryce. During the trip, they were served a fancy dish, and Tyler was thrilled and took a picture, but Margot did not care for it. When they arrived at the island, the maitre d', Elsa, called Margot by the wrong name. So Tyler explained there had been a change of plans, and he was with a different date, making things very awkward. Before dinner, the guests went on a tour where Elsa showed them the facilities and explained that the restaurant staff did all the hunting and farming, which was why everyone lived there. The chef also lived on the island, but his house was off limits. After the tour, they finally entered the restaurant and saw that the kitchen was open, allowing them to watch the cooks at work. An old lady named Linda sat at one of the tables, looking out of place. Elsa announced that they could watch the cooks but could not take pictures. The first dish was a complimentary appetizer. Lillian took her time with the food, smelling and tasting everything carefully, while Felicity was busy trying to break up with George. Margot liked the dish but was not very impressed. Slowick came forward and clapped his hands, making all his cooks turn around at the same time like obedient soldiers. He gave a speech about his work and reminded everyone that they should not just eat, but also savor and enjoy the food. Tyler tried to make a comment but got scolded by Slowick for interrupting. Even though taking pictures was forbidden, Tyler still snapped some photos. For the second course, Slowick clapped again and explained that bread was the food of the common man, but since his guests were not common, they would not get any bread. The next dish was a breadless bread plate with only small drops of savory accompaniments on it. Tyler absolutely loved it, but Margot found it insulting. Lillian thought the emulsion looked slightly split, and in an ironic twist, they sent a whole bowl of it to her table. The tech investors thought the joke was going too far and asked for bread, but they were denied even when they pointed out they worked for Doug Varick, the actual owner of the island. To silence them, Elsa creepily told them they would eat less than they wanted and more than they deserved. Margot refused to eat her dish, and when Tyler tried to take it for himself, he accidentally broke a glass. Slowick immediately came to their table, and Tyler tried to apologize, but the chef was more interested in why Margot was not eating. Margot pointed out that there was no food, and Slowick replied that he had carefully designed the portion sizes, so if she did not eat, she would not feel full. Margot still refused to touch her dish, which offended Slowick, and he surprised everyone by gently checking on Linda. Margot could not help but glance at Richard, and Anne noticed this, pointing out that Margot looked like their dead daughter. With another clap, Slowick announced the third course called Memory, which prompted him to share a memory about his family's old taco nights. He revealed that Linda was his mother and that she had been drunk since he was a kid. His father had also been a drunk, and one night Linda had called him out for it, which made the man try to kill her with the phone cord. To save his mother, little Slowick took a pair of scissors and stabbed his father in the thigh, but he later regretted not killing him. To remember that special taco night, the dish included a smoked chicken thigh served with a pair of scissors on top of a phone cord. The tortillas were made fresh, but to make them special, they were engraved with a laser machine. Everyone felt disturbed by the story, but it became even more awkward when they noticed the memories on the tortillas. Lillian saw pictures of restaurants that closed because of her bad reviews, and Anne was shocked to find photographs of her husband's private life. One photo showed Richard with a strange woman, but Richard insisted it was just a prank. George discovered pictures from his role as Dr. Sunshine, a movie that did poorly when it was released, and the tech investors were troubled to see their company's tax records, which showed they had created fake invoices. Elsa would not explain how they got that information, and when the men threatened to shut down the restaurant, Elsa cryptically told them it wouldn't be necessary. Tyler took pictures of the food and thought Slowick hated him. Margot found the images insulting and wanted to send the dish back, but Tyler snapped at her and called her a child for not behaving properly. Hurt, Margot decided to go to the bathroom, and Elsa rushed to stop her from entering a forbidden silver door. Once in the bathroom, Margot went to the window to have a smoke and saw an employee running with a pair of angel wings in his arms. At that moment, Slowick came to ask Margot why she refused to eat again, feeling hurt by her attitude, but Margot simply said she wasn't that hungry. Slowick wanted to know who she really was, and when she replied that she was just Margot from Nebraska, he did not believe her. A moment later, the cooks began getting ready for the fourth course by placing a piece of fabric and some decorations on the floor. Slowick introduced everyone to Jeremy, one of his sous chefs who made the next dish called the mess. Jeremy had studied at an important culinary school, and his dream was always to work for Slowick. Although Slowick admitted that Jeremy had talent, he did not believe Jeremy was great. Jeremy wanted a life full of prestige like Slowick's, but Slowick thought his life was full of pressure, along with many unhappy customers and critics who did not appreciate his work. Slowick asked Jeremy if he wanted that life, and when Jeremy replied no, Slowick kissed him on both cheeks and stepped back just before Jeremy pulled out a gun. Then Slowick announced the fourth course, and Jeremy ended things in front of everyone. The other cooks watched solemnly and were not surprised, but all the guests panicked and stepped back, except for Tyler, who found it fascinating. As the body was removed, Slowick asked everyone to sit down and accept that this was part of the show. Everyone began discussing whether the death was real or not, and Richard grew frustrated. He tried to leave with Anne, but Elsa stopped him, explaining that there was no boat available. Richard still insisted on leaving, prompting Elsa to order the chefs to grab him and take his ring finger. The guests started to panic again, except for Tyler, who continued enjoying his meal without worry. While Richard struggled on the floor in pain, Elsa returned the fallen wedding ring to Anne. Slowick explained once again that this was part of the menu, and while Lillian accepted it, the others began to feel afraid. Felicity wanted George to talk to Slowick since they were supposedly friends, but George admitted he had lied to impress her. Elsa brought Margot to the kitchen, where Slowick told her she was wrong. He could tell she was not really Margot, and that was a problem because she was not part of the original menu plan. Slowick wanted to know if Margot was on the side of the guests or the restaurant. Not that it mattered since everyone was going to die that night anyway. Margot hurried back to her table in tears and slapped Tyler when he would not stop talking about the food. The atmosphere in the restaurant became tense and nervous. Soren lost control and tried to break a window with a chair, but since it was made of unbreakable glass, Elsa just took him back to his table. The next course was tea, served as a palate cleanser, and Slowick took the chance to ask if anyone had questions. Tyler asked a silly question about the tea, but George stepped in and wondered what was happening. Slowick explained that they were ingredients in a tasting concept, but this shouldn't be surprising. For example, he called Lillian a monster who causes restaurants to close due to her personal taste, and Ted coddled her. The cooks brought more broken emulsion for Lillian. Then Anne asked for a doctor for Richard, so Slowick pointed out that they had been loyal customers for 5 years, yet could not name a single dish they had eaten there. Slowick worked hard to become an exclusive chef, but it was only recently that he understood he had been trying to please people who could never be satisfied, like his own mother. Since Slowick kept referring to the place as his restaurant, Bryce reminded him that the real owner was Doug Varick. Slowick replied that he actually owned Doug, and at that moment, it was revealed that Doug was hanging outside while wearing angel wings. Dave tried to offer money to save Doug, but when Slowick refused, Dave attempted to run away, only to be stopped by the staff. Bryce pointed out that Doug had kept Slowick's restaurant open during the pandemic, but Slowick complained that Doug kept questioning his menu. Elsa made a signal with her arms, and Doug was lowered into the sea until he drowned. Slowick then announced that he was finally free before going to his office. Suddenly, the timer on Margot's table rang, and she was asked to see Slowick. Margot admitted that she was not supposed to be there, and Slowick responded that he could tell she worked in the same industry. He wanted to know why Margot had been staring at Richard, leading her to confess that she was actually a street worker. Richard was one of the few clients who managed to rattle her because he wanted her to pretend to be his daughter while they were intimate. Both Slowick and Margot agreed that they used to enjoy serving others, but bad clients had made them hate their jobs. After that, Slowick took everyone outside. The next course was presented by sous chef Catherine, who explained that Slowick had flirted with her many times, but she had always said no. Slowick didn't fire her, but he stopped looking her in the eye, and this inspired the next dish, called Man's Folly. Then Catherine stabbed Slowick in the leg and hugged him, staining his chef uniform with blood. This made Slowick apologize. Now, all the male guests had a chance to escape. They would get a head start of 45 seconds before the staff tried to catch them. All the men began running except for Tyler. so Slowick had to send him out while Catherine took the women inside. The women tried the 6th course while sitting at a table with Catherine, who explained that the idea of everyone dies was hers. Lillian's compliments made Catherine cry, and the other ladies began offering compliments too, hoping to keep her happy. Anne asked Margot if she knew her husband, and Margot admitted that she did, but Anne did not respond. Eventually, Margot revealed her real name was Aaron and that she was from Massachusetts. Outside, Tyler watched them through the window because he hated missing a course. Meanwhile, the staff chased the men and found them easily, whether they hid in the forest or at the beach. Ted hid in the smokehouse, and for his efforts, he received a passered egg. All the men were brought back to the restaurant, and George sarcastically apologized to Felicity for being a failure, which made her admit she had been stealing money from him. George already knew, and Felicity realized he knew. Suddenly, Slowick announced that the menu could not continue as planned until they resolved an issue. He approached Tyler and made him confess that he had always known tonight's menu would include everyone dies. Tyler had a date, but his girlfriend broke up with him, so he hired Margot because the restaurant did not take reservations for just one person, never caring that she would die. Margot was upset by this revelation and attacked Tyler, but the staff quickly separated them. Next, Slowick pointed out how much Tyler knew about food and gifted him a chef's uniform before pushing him into the kitchen, asking him to cook in front of everyone, even though Tyler didn't want to. Tyler's cooking was messy, especially since Slowick kept teasing him for being Mr. Knowledgeable Foodie, which meant the final dish was a total disaster. Slowick told Tyler he was why the mystery had been drained from his art and whispered something in his ear that made Tyler take off the chef's jacket and run away in tears. After that, Slowick took Margot aside to ask for a favor. To start preparing dessert, they needed a large barrel that was supposed to be in a corner but had been forgotten by Elsa. Slowick wanted Margot to get it and ignored Elsa when she said the staff could do it. As Margot left, she discovered that Tyler had ended things for himself, but she did not care. Then Slowick returned to the dining area, where George pointed out that this was not really fair. Slowick explained that George was being punished because he had seen Dr. Sunshine years ago, ruining the first day off Slowick had in months. On the other hand, Felicity would die because she graduated from Brown University without any student debt. Meanwhile, Margot made it to the smokehouse, but instead of grabbing the barrel, she took a knife. After that, she quietly went into Slowick's house, which looked just like the restaurant but had a bed inside. Margot tried to leave through the silver door, but Elsa stopped her. Elsa had a knife and reminded her that this area was off limits. Suddenly, Elsa attacked Margot, saying she didn't want to be replaced. Margot defended herself with kitchen tools, explaining she didn't want to work there. Elsa said she didn't forget the barrel, but Slowick had never asked for it. The two women fought on the floor, and while trying to stop the knife, Margot accidentally killed Elsa. Once her panic passed, Margot took Elsa's keys and opened the silver door. Inside, she found a small room with memories of Slowick when he was younger, happier, and working with a family making hamburgers. She also found a radio and tried to call for help. Meanwhile, in the restaurant, Bryce was given a cake because his friends had told the restaurant it was his birthday. Margot then entered with the barrel, and Slowick told her he used to be a monster, but now everything he did was pure. His hands were so tough he could touch fire without pain because he couldn't be hurt anymore. At that moment, a boat came toward the island, and Slowick realized Margot used the radio. The staff quickly cleaned up the blood, and Slowick threatened the guests, saying if they asked for help, an innocent man would die. Coast Guard Dale came into the restaurant and asked what was wrong, but no one spoke. Dale recognized George and asked for an autograph since he was a fan of Dr. Sunshine. George pretended to give one, but Dale found the paper said, "Help us," and pulled out a gun, ready to help the guests, who finally spoke up. Dale aimed his gun at Slowick for a few moments before suddenly turning and pointing it at the candle on Margot's table, revealing the gun was just a lighter. Dale wasn't a real Coast Guard, he was part of Slowick's staff. Slowick was disappointed in Margot for betraying him, calling her as bad as the other guests. Margot remembered what she had seen in the house and decided to take a risk. She clapped her hands to get Slowick's attention, saying she didn't like his food and wanted to send it back. Slowick fell for her plan when she pointed out that the dishes were more like intellectual exercises than meals to enjoy. She was still hungry and asked for a simple cheeseburger instead of a fancy deconstructed dish. For the first time that day, Slowick smiled and agreed to make her a cheeseburger with fries for $9.95. The cooks watched in awe as Slowick happily prepared the cheeseburger, which he presented to Margot with pride. Margot took a bite and liked it, but she said it was too much to finish and asked for the rest to be packed. Slowick, still in a daze, did as she asked. After receiving her bag, Margot left a $10 bill and walked out of the restaurant. She hesitated because the others were still in danger, but Anne motioned for her to leave. Margot made it to the harbor and escaped on the boat Dale had left behind, while Slowick reminded the guests it was time to pay. The price was $1,250 per person, with no tips allowed. Everyone was given a bag of treats, including one of Doug's fingers. They all handed over their credit cards, and then Slowick announced it was time for dessert. The cooks began decorating the floor like a plate, and they placed chocolate hats and marshmallow vests on the guests. Slowick reminded them that they represented the downfall of his life, and now they would be part of it. The dessert was a s'more, which is usually roasted over a fire. Slowick grabbed a coal from the oven with his bare hands and declared a cleansing as he threw it on the decorations, setting the restaurant and everyone inside on fire. Meanwhile, Margot stopped the boat to finish her cheeseburger while watching the restaurant burn. She used the copy of the menu from the gift bag to wipe her mouth. The movie ended there.